Okay. So welcome everyone tonight again to another Thursday evening in October. Thank you guys for joining so much the Transplant Journey. Appreciate you guys all joining us tonight and giving up your time and your evening. I just want to welcome Dr. Pereira. He is the medical director of Columbia University Irving Medical Center, also known as Columbia NYP. So grateful to have him here tonight. He is an incredible doc. I'm sure as many of you guys know, when he's spoken with us tonight, he has saved my life many a times. He's treated me for C. diff, not so pleasant for those of you who have experienced it. He's treated me for COVID when I was in for, I don't know, probably seven or 8 long days of COVID. And he was by my side for that, called numerous times, devoted, incredible doctor. He recently received an incredible mention with Hearts for Russ, and it's just very caring, very devoted. He treats hard to treat infectious diseases at Columbia for transplant recipients, and works with bone marrow recipients, HIV, AIDS, and is just a really devoted, kind doctor, and has been kind enough to speak to us in the past for how to treat COVID with vaccines, antivirals, and it's going to speak to us tonight on the latest vaccines, also with RSV, flu shots, and Evusheld, and it's going to give us a little glimpse into what we need to do moving forward, how to protect ourselves, and also family members, what they need to do moving forward, and really how to protect ourselves, because again, unfortunately, we're going into fall. COVID is on the rise again. And, we find ourselves, unfortunately, not having a lot of communication with some of the transplant centers, unfortunately. So what we need to do and how we can be proactive and how we can get ourselves heard and use our patient voice to be proactive in the transplant community. So Dr. Pereira, thank you again for doing this and coming forward. Really appreciate you being here tonight. Guys, again, I'm hearing some background noise, so if I can just ask you guys to mute yourselves, be really appreciative of that. And Dr. Pereira, I'm going to pass it on to you. And thank you again from the bottom of my heart for everything you've done for me and the transplant community, speaking to all of us and really giving us the knowledge and background to take care of ourselves. So Dr. Pereira, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Jen, for those very kind words and the introduction. It's always a pleasure to be doing this. I completely agree with you that, centers like my own, Columbia, have not done a good job of communicating with their patients in terms of updated information and recommendations, in particular when it comes to COVID. So this is my small attempt to do that, and also prodding the institution to be more proactive in those situations as well. So thank you for the opportunity to talk. So let me share my screen. I do have some slides that I was hoping to present here tonight. I think many of you have, for those who have participated in these before, I think of these as sort of updates in terms of, since the last time I've spoken to the group, what is new and what should we be paying attention to. And I believe the last time it was around May, so we were going into the summer, and there were some updates regarding some of the new vaccines. So this is where we are right now, fall/winter updates, right? So and we had gotten a number of questions from people that Jen was able to compile for us. So, in the slides, I'm going to try to answer them as well tonight. And obviously, we'll have some time at the end to have even more questions to go over. So for SARS-CoV-2, sort of what is the current state of affairs, right? This is from the New York City Department of Health. And I always like to share this because this is essentially what's happening in our backyard, right? It impacts Westchester, Connecticut, New Jersey, and certainly obviously people in the city and the 5 boroughs. So, and this is sort of a snapshot of cases, documented cases of COVID in the city. It is from August, it doesn't have the long sort of 3-year span. But in terms of cases since August, as many of you probably heard on the news and maybe even experienced yourselves among friends, family, there was an uptick, and we are in the middle of an uptick of COVID-19, sort of beginning at the end of the summer, and certainly sort of beginning of September, sort of cases have gone up. And this is sort of cases per day, right? Like 500, 1,000, 1,500. So the city did experience certainly an uptick in cases as well as in hospitalizations. And obviously, if you have more cases, you may have more hospitalizations. So we did see an uptick. Luckily, I don't have here the slide on deaths, but that has not changed, which is sort of one of the good news about COVID-19 for the past 2 years, that, you know, even in situations where you may have an uptick in cases and hospitalizations, we're not seeing increased mortality. And that sort of, in some ways, is a testament to the therapies that we have available, and that fact that most people obviously are vaccinated and previously infected. So there is some immunity to the virus. So when they get infected, it's not as severe as it used to be. So we might be peaked, and we might be experiencing, as of sort of early October, a drop in cases. You know, you never know. You certainly can have sort of these curves where it goes down for a little bit and then goes back up again. We shall see. You know, clearly when school comes back in session, you know, we always see an uptick in cases. So who knows what October and then November will bring. And obviously then there are the holidays. For the country as a whole, and this is from the CDC, and this is sort of a big sort of span in the last 3 years, right? Sort of in terms of where does this uptick, how does it compare to prior waves? So this is, I guess this is August from 2020. I'm not sure why they don't have sort of the initial wave of infections here in March and April 2020. But then you see here, this was Delta, sort of in the summer of 2020 and 2021, sort of a bigger wave. It mostly impacted places outside of New York, but a big problem. And then here, this is Omicron, December of 2021, sort of where most of us got infected at that time. And sort of the numbers were huge. And then subsequently, you know, we have sort of these increase in cases, usually with each new variant that comes, that sort of is able to evade immune and vaccines. And this is where we are right now. So even though there is an uptick sort of compared to prior cases, and this is in hospital admissions, it sort of gives you perspective, right? We're not necessarily seeing a major crisis when it comes to COVID-19. And that's really good news in that sense. This is the map in terms of where there are the hotspots of COVID in the country. And maybe Southern Vermont and Southern Virginia are the sort of the closest places, sort of these orange dots over here. These are counties. But the city and the tri-state area certainly seems to be doing okay right now. Maybe some in the Midwest and sort of mountain regions have higher rates, but I think we're doing okay right now here in our areas. Obviously that can change, but it's sort of good to know, right? What has driven this latest uptick in cases is sort of, as you can imagine, sort of it's always what's the newer variant? Last time when I spoke to all of you in May, what we were really sort of thinking hard about and seeing and dealing with was this XBB 1.5, which, you know, it's sort of, they all sound now like the names of robots or a new car model, right? But it was sort of a subvariant of Omicron, able to evade immune systems, but XBB didn't necessarily have increased severity or virulence. So it wasn't causing people to be more sick. You just saw more cases. And it seems that that's the same that we're seeing with the latest variants that's causing a rise in cases lately, and that's EG 0.5. So that's the one that's sort of dominating, or at least sort of increasing in its presence lately here in the United States. And that's the one that we're dealing with right now. It's not clear, you know, if that's going to be the same pattern, it's going to stay for a few months or not. You know, the one thing about COVID that, as many of you know by now, it's sort of pretty unpredictable, right, in terms of what comes next. Hopefully it will be these milder cases, but you never know. So what about EG5? I think it's called the Eris subvariant, but I think we're done with giving them names. And what scientists and people who have studied the virus, sort of what is special about it, turns out not much, quite honestly. It has a growth advantage over the prior variants. It seems that every new variant is able to grow faster or replicate faster, and also sort of attack and attach to human cells a little bit better. So it's becoming more and more refined to humans. EG5 has antibody escape properties, meaning it can evade the antibodies that we produce from prior infections or from prior vaccination. So that means that our immune system sort of, are less fit against this virus. I think a lot of people weren't so sure that it's driving the latest COVID wave, but it seems to be the case at this point. So that's sort of a little bit of an outdated bullet. There's no indication that it's more severe, which is obviously very good news. And actually, and this is the important aspect, right? Because, you can come to the logical conclusion, right? Why are we vaccinating ourselves only to lose the efficacy of our vaccines with a virus that keeps changing every 3 to 4 months, right? So what's the point of staying up to date with our vaccines? It turns out, right, like that these viruses do share a lot of their genetic material and that their proteins and so forth. So prior vaccines continue to have an effect against these newer variants. So case in point, so EG5, the spike protein, right, which is one of the main targets of the vaccines, is very similar to XBB 1.5. And it turns out that, the newest vaccine that we're going to talk about in the next slide is actually modeled against XBB 1.5. So I think everybody is quite optimistic that getting the latest vaccine should protect you against this latest variant. And that's obviously a huge piece of good news.
Wait,
It certainly could be that, we could have discovered that the latest vaccine has no effect against this virus. And I think that all of us would then be a little struggling with recommending it. But that it happens is actually quite good. This, is just a map of sort of people who are up to date with their COVID vaccines as of August 31st. And, people in the Northeast ought to give themselves a little bit of kudos, right? Like we do have some of the highest rates of vaccination in the country. And I think that that's obviously good news for every transplant recipient, every immunocompromised person, every person who has lung disease and are vulnerable to these respiratory viruses, in particular SARS-CoV-2, that these areas have a high rate of vaccination. So hopefully, as a region, as a sort of community, all of these states sort of may experience sort of less severe outbreaks should they come in the future. And obviously, that's good news as well. And in terms of vaccines, right, I think that, in terms of what has happened since the summer, as most of you know, right, on September 11th of this year, the FDA approved both the Pfizer and Moderna updated versions of the vaccines. And that was, after sort of a lot of sort of, discussions and looking at the data and so forth. But this was sort of in the plans for a while, right? I think that they had talked to both companies about updating the vaccine for the latest variants, which was at the time XBB 1.5, and looked at the data, thought it was very good in terms of its efficacy and safety, and then approved it. What's different about these vaccines, and I think I have a slide here, maybe not. What's new about these vaccines, so remember how we kept hearing about last year the bivalent vaccines, right? So the bivalent boosters. And what bivalent means is just means that it has two components of the vaccine, two versions. In the same shot. It had the mRNA of the original virus and the mRNA of Omicron. So that the developers of the vaccines last year thought that if you preserve the original version of the virus, you could actually boost the immune system and have a more efficacious vaccine. It turns out that actually, based on the data from the bivalent vaccines last year, turns out that you don't need to have the original version. In fact, actually, if you just have the updated version of the vaccine, actually it works pretty well and it's incredibly safe. So so what they did this year is just monovalent, meaning only one version of the mRNA in the vaccine, and that's the one against XBB 1.5. So it's a monovalent vaccine. It doesn't have the original version anymore. So the FDA approved those two, the Pfizer and the Moderna, on September 11th. And then the CDC met a week later, right, to make the recommendations. So the recommendations, and I have this here, this is for not immunocompromised individuals, and I have this for adults in particular. Now they have sort of for non immunocompromised, sort of it's on the unvaccinated, which is sort of a rare group of people at this point, right? Those who may have gotten one or more doses of any of the mRNA vaccines, and those who may have gotten sort of the alternative vaccines, right? Novavax and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And basically for the non-immunocompromised, it's pretty simple. Just get one dose of the monovalent vaccine. That's it. For this fall, one shot if you're not immunocompromised, and you're good to go. Okay. And it has to be at least 8 weeks after your last dose of any COVID-19 vaccine, which quite honestly, I don't think anybody has had any vaccines in the last 2 months. So this necessarily shouldn't be a big problem. I bring this up because, many of you obviously have families and friends and people who want to vaccinate themselves, and they're not immunocompromised. So it's good to know that all they need for this winter is one dose of the new version of the vaccine, which is the 2023-2024 formula, okay? Now, for the immunocompromised, for some reason, it just becomes a little bit more confusing as a table. But what it boils down to, if you remember sort of from the original recommendations of what it takes to have the primary series of the vaccine, for non-immunocompromised, it's just 2 doses. For the immunocompromised, you need 3 doses of the vaccine to become sort of, to achieve the primary series. And then everything else is beyond that is booster dosing, right? So that's where you're going to see here sort of a bunch of additional doses, right? So for the unvaccinated, if somebody somehow came down to the planet and was unvaccinated, right, an alien, for example, they would get 3 doses of either the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine, and it can be the newer formulation. And that's the only formulation of the vaccine that's available right now. The bivalent, the original vaccine, they're no longer available, right? They're sort of taken out of the market. So that individual would take 3 doses of the current vaccine, the 2023-2024 formula. And here there's sort of the schedule, right? Between doses 1 and 2 would be 4 weeks. And then between doses 2 and 3 would be at least 4 weeks as well. And by and large, sort of the Moderna and the Pfizer recommendations are essentially the same. If people have had 1 or 2 doses of the Moderna, then you just catch up to 3 doses, right? So if you had 1 dose, you get 2 more boosters. If you've had 2 doses of the Moderna previously, you just need 1 more dose. And the same for the Pfizer. If you already had 1 before, you get 2. If you already had 2, you get 1. And so it all adds up to 3 over here. Now, for the people, many people who have been obviously up to date and paying attention, right? Many transplant patients have already received 3 or even more vaccines in the last 2 years, right? So this is the scenario here for many of you. If you had 3 or more of any of the above mRNA vaccines, what you need is 1 dose of either the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine. Now, that's 1 dose now, and I think I have somewhere a little bit later, the CDC did leave open the possibility of getting an additional, like a second booster of the 23-24 dose 2 months later. Okay, so you could get, for example, a booster dose now, right? And many of you probably have already received it. And then in January or late December, you could potentially consider getting a second dose. Now, it's all very soft language because, as you can imagine, there are no data on this. But they were sort of being mindful that they know that immunocompromised individuals don't respond to the vaccines as well, and that response doesn't last as long. So thinking about when the holiday time comes, and January in particular, where there could be another wave, they're leaving open that possibility that people could get more booster doses in the future. So they're sort of leaving themselves a little room to maneuver. And then here is for the Novavax or the Johnson & Johnson. So it's also important to know the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is no longer available, right? If anybody wanted that vaccine, they can't get in the US anymore. the authorization lapsed at some point earlier this year. And so that vaccine is no longer available. So really what we have is the 2 mRNA vaccines and the Novavax. So Novavax actually, interestingly, is still being updated and actually just got approval 2 days ago of its updated or its booster dose by the FDA. So the CDC has not met yet on the Novavax vaccine and how to sort of incorporate that booster dose. But the data actually were really good. It's actually equally as effective as the 2 mRNA vaccines. And it's sort of a really nice alternative. The reason why I bring up the Novavax, it's actually because it's not an mRNA vaccine, right? Novavax is sort of a more traditional protein-based vaccine. So something like the pneumonia vaccine, right? Prevnar or Pneumovax, also like Shingrix, for example. These are all sort of very traditional vaccines. That mode of vaccine has been in place for decades now, like 30, 40 years. And we know that it's very safe, very effective, with minimal side effects. So that's the alternative. I recommend the Novavax vaccine for people who had sort of reactions to the mRNA. And I'm talking about severe reactions, right? Like people who did pass out or had sort of certainly people who had allergic reactions like anaphylaxis and so forth, right? They should never get the mRNA vaccine again. Novavax is a perfectly safe and effective alternative. Now, what I'm thinking that what they're going to do with the Novavax is they're just going to say, right, if you've had 2 doses or 3 doses of a prior vaccine and you wish to switch to Novavax, or if you've had 2 doses of the Novavax and you want to stay with Novavax, then just get 1 dose now in the fall of the Novavax protein vaccine. But we'll see what they have to say about it. So to answer some questions about COVID vaccination that many of you had, is heterologous COVID vaccination, right? Like the mix and match, right? Helpful to expand the immune response. I have to say, we studied that a lot in the first year after the vaccine, because we're trying to sort of figure out if was there some kind of trick that we could boost the vaccine effect, in particular in immunocompromised patients. A lot of studies were done about this, right? Like you get 1 Pfizer and then Moderna, 1 Moderna, then Pfizer, and all sorts of permutations, right? Like 1 Pfizer, then Moderna, and 1 Pfizer. And then like you can imagine like all sorts of things that people thought about. And it turns out that the data was really confusing. It's not clear at the end of the day that it's better to mix and match versus just stick to 1 vaccine. So what the CDC ultimately recommended is that for the booster vaccine, it doesn't matter what you got before, Pfizer or Moderna, just take whatever is available in the pharmacy. It probably does not matter what vaccine you should get as a booster. They are very similar and they should have the similar impact in terms of efficacy on that person. But if you're doing the primary series, stick with that vaccine, right? Like, so if you're in the middle of your vaccine and you're immunocompromised, you happen to get 2 Moderna doses, in the last 6 months or in the last few months, your next shot, ought to be a Moderna vaccine. Okay. And then for that, you might need to look around the pharmacies and see where they are available. But for the booster, it doesn't really matter. And even, we don't even know, for example, with the Novavax, right? Like, does it matter? You got 2 mRNAs or your last 5 vaccines have been an mRNA dose. Should you get the Novavax? And maybe it's a little bit different mechanism. Nobody really knows. And certainly we don't know enough to make that recommendation. So ultimately it's just whatever is available. And that's where we unfortunately are right now. Now, if somebody gets infected, the next question, right? So what is my suggestion for treatment if a transplant recipient gets COVID? And I see the question about tacrolimus or tacrolimus. So at this point, our treatment algorithms or what we have available is pretty much the same as last year, right? We have 3 antiviral drugs that are available. So that's remdesivir, which is intravenous, right? 5-day treatment. We have Paxlovid, which is a pill. It's also 5 days. And molnupiravir, which is Lagrevio. I want to say that's the brand name. It's sort of the least used of the 3 medications. That's also 5 days. Our algorithms are basically the same If you're in a hospital and you happen to have COVID or you get hospitalized for COVID, you will get remdesivir because it's intravenous. It's sort of the least complicated of the drugs and the one that we have a lot of experience with already. And it's a good medication. So remdesivir remains sort of our first line therapy. If you don't have access to IV, you're home, and obviously IV is much more difficult to get at home. You have to find an infusion center and so forth. Then it becomes sort of Paxlovid becomes your next best option. Now, for transplant patients, obviously Paxlovid, as many of you know or ought to know, Paxlovid has some significant drug interactions with medications like tacrolimus, cyclosporin, as well as sirolimus. It actually causes those levels to go up significantly. And we've had some patients who forgot to stop taking their tacrolimus or their Prograf while on Paxlovid, and they came back with, stratospheric levels of Prograf in their blood, sometimes with toxicity to their kidneys and so forth. So it's very important that if you take Paxlovid or somebody prescribes it to you, and they're not your transplant doctor, before you take that drug, to let your transplant team know that you were prescribed Paxlovid, and one, should you take it or not? And if you do take it, right, so listen to the instructions, right, which will likely be, so hold the tacrolimus. If you're going to take the Paxlovid, hold it for the duration of the treatment, and don't take it until you get a level measured after the completion of the drug. Of the treatment with Paxlovid. It's very important to follow those because you can really have some severe. But if that's done, Paxlovid is very effective. It's got minimum side effects other than this drug interaction. And actually, it's overall, it's a well tolerated, and it's a pill, right? So it's actually sort of a good drug, and we at Columbia prescribed it a lot during the Omicron wave and got a lot of experience with it. I have to say, we are not phased out by that drug and recommending and our ability to manage it. And I think it's because sort of it was the necessity, right? Remdesivir intravenously, it's very difficult to find as an outpatient these days. So Paxlovid is the next best thing, quite honestly. For those who are not on those drugs, tacrolimus, sirolimus, or cyclosporin, it's a little bit easier, right? I mean, it's sort of, you still want to talk to your transplant doctor, but Paxlovid, it then becomes a lot easier to manage. You probably don't have to hold any of your medications. Or, for example, your belatacept infusion, for example. So, but just listen to and discuss this with your transplant doctor. The first thing to do if you get COVID is really to talk to your transplant teams, okay? Now, where can we get outpatient remdesivir in northern Westchester? So with the end of the public health emergency, if you remember, right, so that health emergency declaration ended in May of this year. And with that, sort of all sorts of mechanisms that had been in place from a public health perspective were being phased out, right? So suddenly public funding for medications like remdesivir, Paxlovid, and for the vaccines were being phased out. So an intravenous remdesivir for the outpatient setting is potentially one of those victims, because certainly the number of centers and infusion centers that are available have been diminished severely. So it's very difficult to find outpatient remdesivir. That being said, Columbia Presbyterian and New York Presbyterian does have outpatient remdesivir available. The mechanism as a patient to get it, again, is to contact your transplant provider, and they will connect you. There's sort of this virtual urgent care that New York Presbyterian has. So they will connect you with an internal medicine provider, usually, or like a nurse practitioner from our system, who then will sort of make the decision, okay, you qualify for outpatient remdesivir, and then set the whole thing up for you. I believe that NYP Westchester, the old Lawrence Hospital in Bronxville, has remdesivir that's available. I haven't used it in a while, thankfully, but I think it's still available there. So for those of you who get COVID and that's the route that you wish to go after talking to your transplant team, at least there are some places in Westchester that do have that available. And again, it's just talking to your transplant providers. I can't tell you, I think most transplant centers may have a mechanism to do that. So it really is for those who are not part of New York Presbyterian, it's fine. I'm sure your centers may have the ability to get outpatient remdesivir as well. So what about Evusheld, right? So we talked a lot about vaccines, and I think that by now we are aware that they're sort of great, but not perfect, in particular in immunocompromised patients. We don't necessarily have any new data on how effective these vaccines are in transplant recipients. We haven't done any studies with this newer formulations about antibody responses and cell-mediated responses and how effective and protective these vaccines are. So there are a lot of unknowns. Obviously, we're still going to recommend the COVID-19 vaccine to all immunocompromised patients, but there are a lot of unknowns in terms of its efficacy. And this is why sort of Evusheld it remains an interesting concept, right, for immunocompromised patients. If you remember, Evusheld is this long-acting monoclonal antibody that was released right around Omicron time, so December 2021. That it has really good protective activity against getting COVID, and for those who would get COVID, attenuating the symptoms, making it less severe. Unfortunately, like all of the monoclonal antibodies, right, the virus mutated, and then Evusheld lost its efficacy. So Evusheld hasn't been in the market for over a year, unfortunately, and we currently don't have Evusheld available right now. But what the company is doing, and the company is AstraZeneca, they are currently undergoing a study of Evusheld 2.0, which is, as you can imagine, an updated version of the monoclonal antibody against sort of the newer variants of Omicron. And they do have some data in the lab that shows that it's actually quite neutralizing and quite active against the latest variants. I don't know about EG5. I'm sure they haven't studied against that virus, or at least they hadn't when they set up the study. But they're quite hopeful, actually, that this new formulation will be protective. In order to get approved, they do have to have or sponsor a big study. So the name of the study is called Supernova. And I think I mentioned last time here in May, a number of transplant centers are participating in the study. We are participating in the study. I'm actually the principal investigator at Columbia for that study. So it's a little bit of a plug for the study, and maybe some of you will be contacted by our team. We are currently in the process of actually screening patients based on their transplant providers and what they think a particular transplant recipient may be interested or not. But for those who are on this call and you have a provider at Columbia, contact them and say, hey, I heard from Dr. Pereira about Supernova. Do I qualify for the study, right? Because we can't, from the study team, reach the patient directly. We need permission from the provider to then reach the patient. So the providers really are sort of the gatekeepers for these types of studies. And believe me, we are sort of reaching out to a number, like all the providers at Columbia, and going through this process. But just for you know what it is, it's sort of the monoclonal antibody, right? It's an IM injection or intramuscular injection. Participants will actually get 2 doses of the injection 6 months apart, and then they are comparing it to placebo. And then we'll follow them over the next year in terms of who gets COVID and who doesn't, and if someone gets COVID, how severe it is. And that's what it boils down to in terms of the study design. And I think that sort of, there is sort of this second dose 6 months later type arm for the study. There are a number of inclusion and exclusion criteria, and that's sort of like kind of like how every study is set up, right? So AstraZeneca designed this, we didn't, and we're just sort of carrying the study through our center. But they sort of look at the types of patients who they think would be sort of their target population to study this. And as you can imagine, immunocompromised individuals, this is specially designed for immunocompromised individuals. So anyone who's had a transplant, they're saying here within 2 years, but it's also here anyone who is taking immunosuppressive medications would qualify for this study, provided that they have a bunch of they don't meet any of these exclusion criteria. So, for example, if someone had a problem with their first Evusheld injection, probably not a good idea to enter a subsequent study on Evusheld, right? The products are very similar, as you can imagine. But then there's a bunch of other things, and there are also some tricky things about the COVID vaccine boosters. I think there's a washout period, getting the booster and then enrolling in the study. But we don't think that any of it is sort of a major issue, okay? If you need to get the booster dose right now. RSV to change. And then for whoever has more questions about COVID-19, we have plenty of time at the end to go over it, okay? It's 8:44 right now. So the RSV is not going to be a big thing. So this is sort of a little bit of a recap of what we talked about last time, that RSV, is one of the community-acquired viruses, right? That it comes in the winter, it's one of the big three, right, at this point. Influenza, SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus, and then RSV. They kind of go through the same route, it's person to person, whoever's coughing or have contaminated stuff in their hands and transmits to the other person. And then you have upper respiratory infections, the sniffles, and then in more vulnerable individuals, it can actually become a really nasty pneumonia. So RSV, for example, is a big problem for lung transplant recipients, for example. It is also a big problem for newborns and for pregnant women. So it is a very important virus that people have been studying for decades on how to come up with an effective vaccine. And this year, people did. We do have actually 2 new vaccines that were approved for RSV. So for the world of RSV, this is really exciting. It's a game changer. So there's one from GSK called Arexvy and one from Pfizer called Abrysvo. The names are a little bit mouthful, right? But, they all carry the standard phase 3 studies looking at thousands of patients in the last few years. And it really did show that for those populations who are most vulnerable, the young, the pregnant, and then those over 60, there was pretty good efficacy in terms of protecting them from the worst outcomes of RSV. So this is one of the medications, one of the 2 vaccines. I believe this is the GSK one. And looking at the effect of the vaccine, you can see the ones who got the vaccine. This is the number of cases of RSV. You can see a big separation between those who got the vaccine and those who did not get the vaccine, were placebo, a big difference. They got many more infections than those who got the vaccine. And then how many got sick, right? In terms of who got RSV and how many got sick. Turns out that the ones who got the vaccine rarely got sick, and those who got placebo often got sick from this. So there were all sorts of benefits from getting the vaccine in this population. And here they were looking at adults over the 60 years of age, okay? And same thing with the Pfizer product. It actually was equally as effective in protecting against acquiring the infection, but also protecting the severity of illness in those who got infected. And the results were very similar in terms of 85% or 82% for this one, in terms of being protected from RSV. So the formal recommendations from the CDC, and this is something that we didn't have last time, that either of the vaccine is recommended this fall to individuals over the age of 60. And it's actually just 1 dose, and that's it. It's we don't know. There's no expectation or plans right now for multiple doses or for multiple seasons. They think that 1 shot would be enough to be protected for many years. In terms of efficacy, both vaccines are very similar. No one knows if one is really better than the other one, quite honestly, and both are considered equally as safe. There were some reports of some neurological events after both vaccines, things like Guillain-Barré and so forth, but it was very rare. It was only in 3 people out of 30,000 people studied. So they're going to be monitoring this as the vaccine is scaled up, but nobody thought it was a significant side effect. But, as was the case with the COVID vaccines, transplant patients were included in those studies for the RSV vaccine. So we don't know. The truth is that we don't know how effective this vaccine will be in solid organ transplant recipients. And certainly we don't know enough to make a broad recommendation to like everyone, right? So I think that most in the societies and most folks in transplant infectious disease, what we are recommending right now is, look, if you meet the criteria for the general population, meaning you're over the age of 60, then you should get the vaccine, or you should consider getting the vaccine. In particular, if you're a lung transplant recipient, or if you have pulmonary sort of chronic lung disease, for example, because that would be sort of a really high risk population, right? If you're under the age of 60, we're not being sort of pushy about the vaccine because there's no data at all to support that at this point. I think we're going to be finding out more this year as a vaccine is given, and we'll see if there is sort of a benefit to it. So right now, no one is prepared to recommend to those under the age of 60 to get the vaccine. Because again, we don't know how effective it will be. And we also don't know, will transplant recipients require multiple doses or what regarding this vaccine, okay? But the good news is that they're being a little bit more proactive this time than what it was with the COVID-19. Actually, both GSK and Pfizer have sponsored studies on their vaccine for immunocompromised individuals. We actually had the Pfizer study, and we just finished enrolling it. We got like, I want to say, we met a number of patients that we wanted to enroll, solid organ transplant recipients for the Pfizer vaccine. Now, for the GSK, it's actually opening up soon at our center. It is for kidney and lung transplant recipients. And it's actually, they're looking at anyone over the age of 18, actually. So, so they want to look at those under the age of 60 and see how they benefit and respond to this vaccine. And actually, they're going to compare 1 dose versus 2 doses of the GSK vaccine and see if there's a better immunological response getting 2 vaccines versus placebo or versus the healthy controls. The study is actually sponsored by my boss. Actually, she's a vaccinologist. She does a lot of work in her clinical trials group regarding vaccines. So Dr. Magda Sobieszczyk is the principal investigator of that study. And I have here the link. We have sort of this Recruit Me link where you can go in and sort of see, like, do I fit the criteria for the study? And then if you do, then there's her study team will reach out to you. I'm part of the study team, but I'm not sort of running this particular study. But just go to this Recruit Me website. If you type in Recruit Me Columbia RSV, you should get to this study, and you should see her photo and her name, and then take it there if you're interested. If you're under the age of 60 and you're interested in enrolling in the RSV vaccine. So then some final questions that that we should answer for you guys tonight. So should transplant patients get the COVID, RSV, and flu vaccines? Yes, definitely on the COVID, and most definitely on the influenza vaccines, right? So that's not a controversial topic at all. All adults, particularly those who are immunocompromised, should get those 2 vaccines. The RSV vaccine, I think, is right now really for those over the age of 60, newborns, and for those who are pregnant. They were the ones who are sort of recommended right now to get the vaccine. And that recommendation, quite honestly, is not as strong, even from the CDC, compared to the COVID and the influenza vaccines, okay? Which order should one get the vaccines? So in some ways, the RSV should come last, because I think that we're not in the middle of an RSV outbreak right now. It may come in a few months, but we're not. But which one of the first 2, should you get? I think that in some ways it might be more availability. If you happen to be in the doctor's office and they have the flu shot available, just take it, and then later get the COVID shot. And then much later, if you qualify, then get the RSV. However, if the COVID shot is available, then just get it, and then get the flu shot a little bit later, okay? Now, in terms of how many weeks should we wait between each vaccine, it turns out actually that the CDC and the FDA and all the data, all 3 vaccines are safe to get together. So you can theoretically get all 3 at the same time. Now, I don't know who would do that. I mean, it's a lot of needles and a lot of vaccination, but they don't interact with each other. So it's theoretically safe. So what that means is, if you want to get 2 of them, so if you're there and you're traveling, for example, and this is your opportunity to get both COVID and flu, it's okay to get, I'm sure they're going to give it in different arms. I'm not sure what the strategy would be. You certainly may be sore the next day, but it's not going to reduce the efficacy of either vaccine, and it's not going to make you more sick in terms of increase the risk of a major severe reaction to the vaccine. So certainly the COVID and the flu shots can be perfectly safe to get it, as would be with the RSV as well. Now, if you want to sort of wait, right, like space it out, nobody really knows, but about a week should be fine. If you so you get the COVID, it was there, you got it. You want to wait a week for the flu shot, wait a week, and then get the flu shot afterwards. And if you really want to get the RSV because you qualify and you think you are at risk, then get the RSV vaccine then a week later as well. Some people may say 2 weeks, but it's really there are really no data to guide us on that. Should family members who live with a transplant recipient get those vaccines? Yes, right. So the COVID and flu shots, definitely. If they qualify for the RSV vaccine, then yes, right. If they're not immunocompromised, then they actually, would fit squarely in the RSV data, and that they should be fine. And the idea of vaccinating family and friends and people who interact with you, like, for example, coworkers who may share an office or come into contact quite often, is because by them getting vaccinated, they're protecting you as the transplant recipient. So incredibly important to have that, and to make that recommendation for all around you. Okay. And then the same thing applies to the next question. Should other family members who do not live with the transplant recipient? Well, if they come into contact with that person at family gatherings, for example, with the holidays and so forth, yes, I think that it ought to automatically be a message to the whole family, like, hey, we're planning a big Thanksgiving celebration. As many of you know, this person is a transplant recipient and would like to be there. So please get vaccinated for at least COVID and influenza, to protect that person. Okay, so that would be sort of an important aspect. Those are the questions that I had, and those are the slides that I had. I know that I talk too much once more, and it's 8:56, but I can certainly be happy to take questions. And I'm going to look over here a little bit in the chat and see what
There were two questions that definitely came up, Dr. P.
Yes.
One was in particular, will NYU be participating in the study with COVID, you think?
They do a lot of studies. I bet you NYU would. They're generally very, very fast forward thinking into joining these studies as well. Now, a number of centers that I spoke with did not want to do the Evusheld, or didn't have the capacity to do it, I should say. So not every center may want to do that, but the vaccine studies, I think that they've reached out to a number of centers. So it might be just important to check in with them. I haven't Googled NYU, the RSV vaccine or Evusheld. Now, will our study reach out to NYU Langone patients? Probably not. I guess maybe I misinterpreted the question. Probably NYU will reach out if they are sponsoring that study themselves, right? Like through their own clinical trials group, they might be reaching out to their own patients who follow with their transplant provider. So if you're an NYU patient, just check in with your transplant provider.
And the other question was, if you're only on Tacro, should you is it safe to stop Tacro if you are prescribed Paxlovid?
Robert, I that obviously really depends on the situation, right? So if you're only taking tacrolimus, I'm guessing maybe you're a liver transplant recipient who generally do require less immunosuppression. I think that will be a discussion with your transplant recipient or transplant provider, who may say maybe Paxlovid is not the right thing for you, right? And maybe we ought to try remdesivir. I know that, for example, some of our liver transplant providers then have thought about the molnupiravir in that setting because they didn't think it was safe to stop the one immunosuppressive medication, even if it's just for 5-6 days, right? Especially when we have some alternatives. Oh, you're a heart transplant and just on one drug. Yeah, I definitely would talk to the heart team. I would be hesitant to suggest that stop all immunosuppression for the treatment so that you can take Paxlovid. That being said, Paxlovid does maintain tacrolimus levels for several days. It kind of freezes the level for some time, but it's a little bit unpredictable. And I would bet the heart transplant provider would feel a little nervous saying stop the one immunosuppressive medication that you're on. So they might look for alternatives here.
I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
It's regarding the supernova. I was called this morning from Columbia to be on the study, which is fine because I had the 4 Evershield shots. But here's my question. If there's a placebo involved and I don't get the RSV and I don't get the COVID shot before, how long do I have to wait? It seems to me I should get the COVID shot like right away and then start the study.
Yeah, I would. I think that's a good idea. I don't remember right now what the
I think it was
washout.
28 days, I think they said.
Yeah. We may not, I think that it's my expectation is it will be sort of the end of October, beginning of November that will be injecting patients. So if you want to just get it as quick as possible,
Right.
I think that's
And what about the RSV?
I probably would wait until after. I forget the time afterwards, but I think it's also 28 days, right? So I would just do that afterwards.
It's actually 3 months. Yeah. If you get the study shot, then you have to wait 3 months to get the COVID shot, is what they told me.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll find out. I'll find out from somebody's
Yeah.
going to call me.
Yeah. I mean, then, it might be an incentive to get it as soon as possible, right? So that then you sort of, when the time comes, you'll be ready to get those.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mind if I jump in on that? So I'm lined up to get my first dose of the new version of the Evusheld, and I was told that the actual blind study is for either the new medication or the Evusheld itself. You'll get one or the other, so you won't have to
changed. No, so that changed. So that was their original study design. So there was no placebo. There was the original Evusheld. And you might remember when I presented this in May, that was the original design. And they, AstraZeneca, they justified that decision by saying that maybe Evusheld would still have some activity. We know it's safe and would, they thought that maybe they could provide some protection, right? But it turns out that a lot of centers felt that that was not the case, that they were giving a drug that they knew wouldn't necessarily not be clinically significant. And in fact, obviously was taken off the market, right? So they didn't think that that was the right thing to do. So AstraZeneca then revised their study design and now it's placebo and it's not the older formulation.
Okay, well, I'm glad I asked the question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still going to get in the trial, so I'll get that tomorrow. I'll keep you guys posted. And then I go back the following Friday and I get blood work done to see how things look at that point. That's what I was told so far.
Very cool. Where are you getting it? At us?
That'll be a Georgetown infectious disease.
Got it. Yeah. So every center is like gearing up to do it. Yeah. We're a few weeks behind. So what did they tell you about the vaccines?
Not too much yet. I'll find out tomorrow when I talk to the team about that. So I'll definitely fill you guys in when I get the info.
Yeah, it's the vaccine, I think, is sort of a little bit of the sticker, in terms of sort of exactly what was mentioned before,
Right.
Yeah. But they're trying to be very flexible about it for sure.
Another question, Dr. P, is do you need a script for the RSV vaccine?
I don't think so. I think you can show up to the pharmacy and get it, much like the flu shot or the COVID. However, the thing that's important to know about the RSV vaccine is that, we're still finding out how insurances are paying for it, right? So really check with that pharmacy before you get the injection. because the vaccine could be a bill of about $200, $400. So make sure that your insurance covers it before you get it, and obviously the pharmacist there will look for you and make sure it's covered or not.
So I have information on that also. So I went to CVS and I got a flu shot a week and a half ago, and I wanted to get the RSV, and they did the research and they told me you can't get the RSV unless you want to pay $400 out of pocket.
Yeah.
So I called my Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I am now on a call list. As soon as they approve it, they'll call me and let me know I can go get it.
Yeah.
So definitely talk to your insurance companies first.
And I've also experienced that, you know, some pharmacies have sort of already some kind of setup, right? Like I forget now, and I don't remember this necessarily, but like Rite Aid does or Walgreens does versus the others don't. So it's really important to look around and ask first before you get it, okay? Even if you qualify for it.
Milt, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Well,
Is he
Nope.
talking, Jen?
I don't know. Milt, you're on mute. Are you there? Because your hand's raised. If you're there, Milt.
he did mention that he took both flu and COVID shots in separate arms and had no
Arms.
problem.
Yeah. I don't know if he's there. I'm not sure. All right, we can come back to him. Someone, there was another question regarding masks.
Yeah.
Wearing masks.
I think that we're in the same boat as in the last few years, right? I think that if you are going to major gatherings, in particular indoors, no reason not to protect yourself by wearing a mask, being cautious, right? Even if you're vaccinated, again, as an immunosuppressed individual, you may not have full protection, and don't assume that others around you are vaccinated, right? The problem is that even though we're doing a good job in this region, it's still not 100%, as many of you know. So,
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there we go. There's
hi.
Yeah, I couldn't get to it. Yeah, I'm on a call list too for my pharmacy. They let me know that they have established something where they're letting the people know they have their shots taken there. They will let you know exactly when to come in because they got to cover it with the insurance companies first. So that's a good thing. I was glad to hear that. It saves a lot of running around back and forth because it's very expensive for the shot. I've taken both my shots and I always take one in each arm, and it worked out fine for me with the COVID and with the flu. The question I have, I believe you said once I take the RSV, I would not have to take it no more. Was I clear on that? Because I'm 64 years old now. So once I take it, that's it for me?
That's the current recommendation, Milton. That's exactly right. So they don't think it's going to be a seasonal vaccine like flu and what COVID is becoming, you know, because they don't think that RSV mutates as much as influenza and SARS-CoV-2, right? The reason why we need to sort of get vaccines every winter or fall for flu and now COVID is the virus keeps mutating and escaping the vaccine protection from the prior year. So we don't know, right? I've asked a number of people. Obviously, it's a big unknown. They don't expect RSV to mutate as much. It hasn't mutated in the last several decades. It doesn't have the same pattern. It goes to the southern hemisphere and back. But you know, we're introducing something new, right? And life, like these viruses, wants to survive. So I wouldn't be surprised if it mutates and escapes the vaccine, and in a few years they have to update it, you know.
Okay. But right now, just
right now there isn't. This is it's a one dose, right?
Okay. Good.
However, if for example, studies like the GSK, right, that are studying 1 versus 2 doses of the vaccine, if they discover in that study that immunocompromised patient really needs 2 doses, Sterling may get a call back, right, from your transplant team and say, hey, that was great that you got that RSV shot in the fall of 2023. Turns out that actually you need a second one because you're a heart and liver transplant recipient.
Yeah, that's why I was also,
But right now we don't have that recommendation. We don't know.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. I just want to share kind of an interesting story for those of you who haven't gotten your vaccines. This happened to myself and my dad this weekend, and my dad even last week. We went to go get our vaccinations at CVS, and we showed up, and our appointments when we checked in were canceled on us. And just so you guys know, if you guys go through CVS, pay no attention to that. There's a glitch in the system.
Yeah, there is.
So show up anyway. Your appointments haven't truly been canceled.
Yeah, that's happened to me before too, Jen. Yeah.
Yeah. So continue on as though you haven't received this notification of a canceled appointment. Your appointments are absolutely valid. Continue to check in at the front desk and you will be vaxxed. I don't know what's going on with your computer system, but just completely ignore those text messages, emails, whatever. Continue on as though your appointment is still scheduled, follow through, and they will vax you. There's just something totally wrong in their system that's messed up.
You're right, Jen. I've been through that too.
Yeah, my dad had it happen to him twice, and finally he just gave up and went to another pharmacy after that happened to him twice. So I was glad I persevered and just like spoke to the front desk and showed up anyway. And they're like, oh, no, we have your vaccine. It's all set and prepared and you're good to go. So like I said, I don't know if this is going on at other places, but this happened to us at CVS. So, yeah.
So Mike has a good question here. Maybe I'll read it out loud. So what is the risk for Tacro-only liver transplant patients having anything other than mild COVID? I'm inclined to not care about getting COVID or the vaccine. I had COVID in March 2023, 7 months post-COVID, and did get remdesivir, but only experienced very minor symptoms. So first, Mike, I'm glad you're feeling okay, and it was very mild. And I think that the honest truth is that that's the vast experience for most people, right? Like if they get COVID at this point, it is mild. We do see people getting hospitalized still though, and there generally are sort of immunocompromised patients or those who sort of are over the age of 60 or have underlying lung disease, for example, or maybe, poorly controlled diabetes or something like a chronic medical problem, right? Those patients are still getting admitted and still having sort of prolonged hospitalizations where they do have shortness of breath and so forth. So that is not completely gone. What we are able to do is sort of avoid people dying, the way things were in 2020. But people are still getting hospitalized. Now, it's much better than before. Transplant patients remain at high risk, even if you're just on tacrolimus. At the end of the story, the end of the day, you're still somewhat immunocompromised. So the virus is going to replicate sort of more robustly in someone who doesn't have the immune system. So there is a potential there for risk. The other thing that I would say that we're discovering, or at least have come to a really great realization 3 years on, is the idea of long COVID. So for those who don't get treated for COVID, there might be sort of an increased incidence of sort of persistent symptoms, whether it's like the brain fog or the fatigue. Some people do have dizziness and so forth. And it's hard to know whether the vaccine or prior COVID attenuates long COVID or not, but there's a sense that the vaccine also sort of helps decrease the risk for long COVID. Maybe these things are on the margin, right? But for some people, it's a big difference in terms of quality of life. So it's still something to be taken seriously, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So what do you think about us? I do the quadrivalent flu shot. I've heard that other people that are just doing the single dose, the one prescribed for the fall for this year, may have to go back because that strain may change. It may be something different, and they'll have to go back and get another flu shot somewhere along the way.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, so the flu shot obviously has to be changed every fall, right? So they kind of predict what's coming our way based on what's happening in the Southern Hemisphere. I think this year it's kind of okay. It's like 50% what they predicted is might be what's coming our way. And there is sort of a difference between the high dose and the sort of just the standard dose influenza, right? So for those over the age of 65 or those on dialysis, for example, the high dose is sort of generally recommended. Some centers do recommend the high dose as well to immunocompromised individuals. I happen to have a very by the book set of pharmacists who said the data don't really justify making that recommendation to transplant recipients. But if you have that, it's available, and it's sort of, if that's the vaccine to get, then get the high dose. Shouldn't be a problem. Now, for the thing about the influenza vaccine that I think we're going to discover or look into in the next several years, right? How long does the protection last, right? So if you get the flu shot now in October and there's a flu outbreak in March, right, 5 months later, well, should someone get redosed with the flu shot if there's an outbreak coming? Or is that dose 5 months earlier still okay? We don't know that yet.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. I know they always say don't get your flu shot in the beginning of September because it's not going to carry you all
Early,
the way
yeah,
through.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very tricky to figure out when to time your flu shot, right? Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. So most people get it in the beginning of November, right? Like the holidays are coming, and at least throughout November and December, maybe they will have sort of peak protection, right? And I think that maybe that's sort of something with COVID as well.
I know they
Is
started pushing it early.
Yeah.
Is there any data, doctor, where maybe by taking both the COVID and the flu shot together, that may prolong to help you out going a little bit longer?
I haven't seen any data of that nature. I think they've looked mostly at safety.
Okay.
They also looked at the other way around, right? Like, are there data that it's less effective,
Okay.
and I haven't seen that. So they were looking mostly in that way. I don't know if anybody studied, like, is it going to be better, and I don't think it is, but I don't think it's sort of, there are data out there.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Dr. Pereira? Let me just make sure and switch to my other screen.
Thank you, Alan. My pleasure.
Thanks to you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doc.
Awesome. Appreciate your time.
No
And
problem.
Jen, thank you for pulling this together.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Always, yeah.
Of course. Of
Thank
course.
you so much. Thank you.
If you
Okay.
guys want to take a couple of minutes and go around and introduce yourselves, for Dr. Pereira, just to know what other transplant centers are represented. If you guys want to stay on a little bit longer, it's totally up to you guys. Or if you guys want to check out, because I know it's, after 9, so I know it's late for a couple of people. It's totally up to everyone who wants to stay on and introduce yourselves. Oh, I see Caroline has raised her hand though.
Hi, thank you very much, Janet, and thank you very much, Doctor. I'm post-op 1 year Monday.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Thanks, and I really thank God I have no problems. I'm back. I swim 2 miles a week. I play golf 3 times. Play bocce. Everything I did before.
Great.
So,
Oh, wow, that's excellent.
and I had my transplant done in Einstein.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, nice.
So thank you again.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thank you for
Living
joining
life.
tonight.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm Alan Gannick. I had my change of heart in 2019 at NYU Langone. So I'm 4.5 years out, and feel great. I have the normal aches and pains that somebody my age has, but it doesn't stop me from playing tennis and softball and doing my woodworking and so forth. And I'm very grateful to the transplant doctor community, because the general community really has no idea what this is all about, and it's not so easy to find the kind of information you provided tonight. So I really appreciate it. It's nice to get a view from another transplant center. So thank you.
Alan, this is the transplant ID doctor in me. If you're gonna do woodworking, make sure you're
Mm.
wearing a mask, okay?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I have a constant pressure mask that I wear, and
Very
even just
good.
around the shop, I wear a face shield. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Alan, for joining tonight. Anyone else want to go for it and introduce themselves? Go ahead.
Yeah, Milton Mitchell, heart and liver recipient, and also a living liver donor through a domino procedure. So I feel full circle with that aspect of it. I also have compromised kidneys, but they've been stable for the last 7 years, remarkably. So I'm amazed with that. And I'm also a survivor of hereditary amyloidosis, which actually brought all this on at 52 years old, just walking in for an annual physical. And it just snowballed into where I am today. But I've been healthy. I haven't had any reactions to any of the medications. I've been doing well, very active. I believe in staying healthy, fitness, watching my weight, water, and everything. So I'm blessed thanks to the donor family and my transplant center. I put them up against anybody. I think they're very informed. They try to keep you educated as much as possible. But as a transplant recipient and stuff, I do ask questions all the time. So I might be a little needle in his side, but I think it keeps them on their toes as well as it keeps me healthy.
That's good. I like that.
Thanks, Milt. Robert, I see you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Bobby Ackerman. Thank you very much, doctor, and thank you for the transplant journey, for putting this together. It's great, and we enjoyed the information very, very much. I got my new heart in June of 2019. Was never sick a day in my life, and so it's been quite an experience. But I'm incredibly grateful, happy, and I love meeting other transplant recipients and people in the field. It makes us feel that we're not alone, because it's very, very unique, and it's great. And I've met Alan before. We know each other, and my transplant was done at WMC, Westchester Medical Center.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled with them and the care that we've gotten there as well.
Fantastic. That's really great to hear.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're all blessed.
Okay.
Truly.
Joan, go ahead.
Yeah, I got my transplant at Columbia 17 years ago, and I'm doing great. Everything is really good. I had COVID right after Thanksgiving, but we didn't go anywhere. We were home. So, you don't know how you get it and when you get it. And I had the remdesivir. I had 3 infusions at Cornell for 3 days, and I wasn't really sick at all. So that was wonderful. So all I have to say is I love this kind of thing, because you get information that you really don't get like in a newspaper or a magazine. So it's important. And I thank you very much, Dr. Pereira.
Oh, my pleasure.
Anyone else want to go ahead? Go ahead, Harold.
I am a transplant recipient of a kidney and a pancreas, just like our leader Jen here. I got mine 7 and almost half years ago at Georgetown University Transplant Institute. I do a lot of ambassadorships for different communities throughout the country. I talk to patients 50 or 60 a day, trying to help them through the process pre and post.
Wow.
And just to keep you up to date, I am now going for surgery on Monday for 2 spots of melanoma. And that's not my first round. I've had plenty of those already. So it's a side effect of those medications we take. And I just seem to have it a little more than some of the others people I talk to. But I know others that have had more than me, and they've been around longer. So I'm here to fight, and I'll keep going.
There you go.
Thank you for the help tonight.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Harold. Callie, go ahead. I see you waving your hand.
Why not? You jump on the kidney pancreas bandwagon. My name is Callie. I had my kidney pancreas transplant in June of this year. So I'm new to all of this. I am learning. This group has been phenomenal. Just the knowledge that we can all share together is great. And I had mine done here in North Carolina at Wake Forest Baptist Health.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing great. just, I mean,
Great
doing
to
great.
hear. Great.
Couldn't be
great.
more blessed.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Callie. All right, who else would like to share? Remy, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for all the information tonight. I am a kidney transplant recipient, 1 year, 11 months, and 19 days. And I'm just pinching myself. I'm sometimes having really hard time to believe how good it can be on the other side. It's just amazing. And you know, you go through cycle, you forget, you enjoy life, you come back to reality, and having people like you that on top of it share information, keep us connected and reassure, and we go about another day. So thank you so much for participating and for the transplant journey to you know, feel we are. I had the transplant at Toledo Medical Center. I live in Philadelphia, so Jefferson now is doing my follow-up. Great teams on both sides, but you still sometimes go through some angst and panic and can't believe it could be that good. And so knowing that you have a community and hearing people having different hiccup, it feels like I'm not alone. I'm not the only one, and everybody, you know, they are out of the they miss a meeting for a week and they come back, and it's like, okay, I can do that too. And it's like a big family and we help each other. So that's actually a very important part of the journey. So thank you, everybody.
Remy, you look like you're getting ready for the winter time there.
It's November. I'm preparing.
Looks good, looks good.
Okay, I'm gonna pick on someone who's waiting, who's new. David. Oh, David, because you haven't been transplanted yet. Yes, I'm picking on you over there in the corner. Introduce yourself,
Yes,
please.
yes, Jen. My name is David. I am in end-stage renal disease. I'm also relatively new. It's just past a week that I started PD. That seems to be going well. I'm not on the nighttime cycle yet. I've got to go for training for that. But otherwise, everything's been going well. And I passed my what do they call it? The not the transport test that they test you for PD to make sure you're capable of doing it. That your peritoneum is actually permeability test. That's what it was called.
There you go. Yes.
So I got that, and I'm okay with that, and waiting. And the group has been fantastic, even before a transplant, because just knowing that all these people have been through it, wow, this is possible. It's not the end of the world. It's gonna be okay. So thank you all. But I do have one other question. Is it possible to get Remy's accent transplanted into me?
Oui. Small the wine. That's the way to, you can try.
All right.
Jen, I don't know who that is. Moto Z4
Yep.
was raising his hand.
Oh, okay. Please, Moto C4, go ahead. Oh, you're on
you're
mute, I
muted.
think. You're muted. Or we can't hear you at least.
Yeah.
Yep, you're muted. Please share with us.
The microphone doesn't work.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Because now you're on mute, but we still can't hear you.
Touch the screen and then you'll see the mic.
Well, he's muting and unmuting, but it's not picking him
Oh,
up.
yeah,
So
we can hear you. Uh-oh.
yeah, something on your end.
Mm-mm.
I'll share
Sorry.
for him just real quick. He's a friend of mine. He's really
Okay.
excited. He's a liver and he is just out of the hospital today from his kidney transplant.
Oh, congratulations.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Woo.
Hmm.
Oh my God, thank you for joining tonight. We're so happy to have him here. Congratulations.
Welcome home.
That's
Literally, now he'll get a good night's sleep.
incredible.
No poking and prodding for the first time.
I think he has a kidney shirt on. Is that a kidney? That's a kidney.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, wow.
All right, well, Jamie, go ahead and introduce yourself then, since you brought the friend to the group.
Sure, I brought a few tonight. I'm Jamie. I'm Hopkins transplant, Dr. Cameron Delta program. So he leads nation in alcoholic hepatitis transplants. And I lost my kidneys to hepatorenal syndrome and tacro. So I received a kidney transplant this year as well. That is me.
Woo. Thanks, Jamie. All right. Let's see. Carol's iPad. Do you want to go ahead? Give her a minute. Nope. All right. Jean, go ahead.
Evening, everybody. I'm Jean Syme, and I was on in-center hemodialysis for 3.5 years before I received my kidney transplant at St. Barnabas in New Jersey. Cooperman Barnabas now is the name of it. I received my kidney from a generous altruistic donor who chose to be in my life, and she's still in my life, and it's been a blessing. And we are going on, we just passed 4 years in June. I wanted to thank you, doctor. You are awesome. And you have given us some tremendous information tonight, more than I'm sure any of our transplant centers have explained all these different vaccines and, should you get, the COVID shot and RSV and the flu shot and all that. So thank you so much, because you just made it so easy to understand. And even though I'm 4 years out, it still gets very, very confusing. So I appreciate you and thank you so much for being on tonight. I just wanted to add that I had my kidney evaluation on Monday at St. Barnabas, and they reinstated the mask mandatory requirement. And I'm so glad, because my nurse who's assigned to me was not there. I did not ask why she wasn't there and why she didn't take care of me that day. But I received a call from her that evening from a private phone number, and I wasn't going to answer it, but I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's the doctor that's calling me. And actually, she was calling me with her results. She was home with COVID. So it's interesting. Yeah, I'm glad she wasn't there, but I heard she was only out for like a day, which kind of concerns me, because she called me the next day for another result and another change in medicine. So I just wanted to say that they were the first ones to reinstate it back, and I was really happy to see that. And they were pretty strict in making sure that everyone that came in had it, and they had ample supply of it for people as well. But thank you, and congratulations on your award as well. Very much deserves. And Jen, thank you for having Dr. Pereira with us again. Awesome. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, and take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jean. Laura's iPhone. You're on mute if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. Maybe not. All right. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa. My husband Joe had a double lung transplant in February of 2022 at Baltimore. And I just can't thank you enough, Doctor and Jen, for all this information. It's such a help, because you really kind of feel lost, and it's just so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the more knowledge and information we have, the more empowered we feel. And that's what's so important in this whole journey for all of us.
Yeah. And even though I'm not the recipient, like these sessions help so much, because it makes you feel not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's what's so scary, I think, for a lot of us, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think when you're a caretaker or care partner, right, the helplessness is one of the worst parts.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So the more information I can gather, and because as you all know, all those drugs kind of affect your memory a little bit too. So sometimes it's hard for Joe to grasp all of this. So I try to listen and then take it back.
You're the extra set of ears, Lisa.
I am. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Ira and Glenda, are you guys still there?
We are indeed.
All right, go for it, guys.
Well, Glenda's still.
We can't
We
see
would,
your
if
face.
you
We can't
ask
see
me
your
to tell
face.
Glenda's story, we'll be here till tomorrow morning. Please let us just both say, Dr. Pereira, once again, we are indebted to you for taking this time with us. It really you really bring the community together with the information you give us and help us, work on a common ground. And we're Dr. Pereira is too shy to tell you that he just received an award. Oh, he did. Oh, all right. Well, I'm glad. Good. Thanks, Jen. Everybody should know that many people in the outside community recognize him. So, and we are indebted to you.
Just so everybody else knows, I'm a 24-year and 3 months kidney pancreas transplant.
Amazing, Glenda.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Good to see you guys. I haven't seen you guys in a while.
We've been
Too busy, been traveling.
Grandchildren.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Jen.
They're usually out celebrating. They're too busy.
Well, one of the reasons that I'm getting my shot for the study tomorrow is because I was down in Florida with my boys. We went fishing. I was telling you last week before I left, or the last time we got together, I should say 2 weeks ago, and had a great time down there. We hit Disney for a couple of days with my wife and some in-laws and things like that. So it was a blast. And so far, no problems. And I wore my N95 everywhere I went.
Hey, there you go.
Good.
Out
What you gonna
celebrating.
do,
Yep, out celebrating. There you go. Awesome. Running Scared, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please? Let's see if she's there. I don't know who Running Scared is. That's a new name on the board for me. I don't know if they're still there.
I'm still here. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you, Running Scared?
Jen, you know me. This is Patrick.
Oh, Patrick, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine.
Go ahead and introduce yourself so others can meet you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Patrick Rogers from Orlando, Florida. I met Jen, on LinkedIn, and then I'm actively trying to get a heart and kidney transplant. But I'm having a difficulty time because of my antibodies are too much. I went down to Cleveland Clinic, down south, right next to Miami, I think of Fort Lauderdale, Tuesday. And wasn't good news, not what I expected to hear. And but they still say they're gonna try to see what they can do. But he don't think that it's really going to work out. So I was kind of disappointed when I went there Tuesday. And my journey has been very long. I don't travel to Vanderbilt, Tennessee. I got turned down from a whole lot of places. And I about covered every transplant down south. Like I said, I'm in Central Florida. And so on the places that I hadn't been, I've been to Shands in Gainesville. On the places I hadn't been, and the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. So I think Pensacola's Sacred Heart is the only transplant center that I haven't really talked to or been to yet throughout the whole state of Florida because everybody turned me down. But I got my head up. I'm very optimistic that this is going to happen for me. And I just need the pain to stop because I have the angina pain and it mimics as a heart attack. And I have shortness of breath. So it's hard for me to walk to the bathroom, to walk to the patio, to walk to my couch because of the pain that I have. And I wear a 24-hour nitro patch, which is 0.4. I have to wear one every 24 hours. And I take the pill also, and morphine.
Oh.
And Tylenol.
Oh boy. Wow.
Oh, yeah, my journey is difficult, but this is what I'm facing every day. And that's my life for now. And it was glad, I was glad to hear and see you guys, you know, and listening to the doctor talk. I mean, I'm enjoying all of this right here. And so I'm picking up some nuggets, and I can't wait for the next talk from you, doctor. Anybody else?
I'm so glad you joined tonight. I'm really glad to hear it. And you know what? Every patient's story is a story of struggles and bumps and hiccups along the path, right? We all have individual stories to share and tell. And that's why we're here for one another, to support each other through it, right?
Yes.
We're all fighters in this.
Yes, we are.
That's why they call us warriors, right, guys?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course.
Dr. Pereira, you still on?
He is.
I'm here. Yeah.
I've heard some treatments are available for people with high antibodies. Is that a true fact? That they can
for donor-specific antibodies, cause of rejection. Yeah, there are all sorts of treatments and studies, right? I mean, so people can get things like, for example, what I've seen some of the transplant doctors do would be things like plasmapheresis, then IVIG, where you just get rid of those antibodies, right? I'm seeing things sort of similar to a medication called rituximab that just stops antibody production, period. Could be a little bit more immunosuppressive, as you can imagine, but if it sort of reduces the rate of rejection, sure, right? And I think that there are some other experimental drugs to try to sort of tame down, right? Like bring down sort of the level of antibodies. Yeah. So hang in there, Patrick.
Yeah. We're going to be hosting a webinar in the next couple of months, speaking specifically about rejection. So definitely look for that, guys. We're going to be having some docs talk on that. So that's going to be coming up in the next couple of months. Haven't gotten that on the schedule yet, but we're going to be discussing.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see that. That'll be posted. Bobby, I see you put your hand up, and Dr. Pereira, we want to be mindful of your time because you get up early, you start your days early. So I know if you have to jump off, we all totally understand, and just want to say thank you again for doing this tonight. You're wonderful as always and really appreciate it. So.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Yeah.
My question was, Doctor, what do you tell your transplant patient recipients about people who are thinking about traveling on cruise ships, traveling on planes, or even just going to a restaurant in Manhattan or wherever you live and going to restaurants?
Those are great questions. So maybe we can take them separately, right? So, I think planes have ultimately, it seems like they're pretty safe. There's a lot of filtration in the air, a lot of circulation. I mean, that being said, I would wear a mask, right? I think you're going to sit around people who have no control over, and it's safe to travel, but wear a mask.
And eye protection.
And in terms of restaurants, obviously like outdoors, that's an easy sort of solution, but indoors during the winter, that's a harder one, right? I think you have to sort of be just mindful of what's happening around. If COVID numbers are going up or influenza numbers are going up, and it seems that the risk might be higher because you're going to be exposed more, then maybe it's not worth doing it. But if the numbers stay fine, and you can sort of limit your time and your exposure in that place, then, and it's a special occasion, for example, it might be it might be okay to do it, right? You want to balance out your quality of life and sort of taking risks, but sometimes it's worth going to a place, right? I don't want to say for you to stay at home the whole time. It's not fair,
You do.
As far as cruise ships, listen, I have a soft heart for cruise ships. No one else in my family does, but I kind of like it. That being said, I'm fully aware that cruise ships are basically just full of infections, right? I mean, think about norovirus, for example, like every year there's like several cruise ships, right? Like that just hundreds of people come out infected. Certainly we saw that with COVID as well in the beginning. So it's one of those things. Maybe if it's a short cruise, maybe okay, mind what you're doing in the cruise ship. Like, maybe the pool is not the best place to go. But if it's a longer trip, especially sort of popular places like the Caribbean and so forth, like you want to just sort of be careful.
Thank you very much.
Floating petri dish. That's what I refer to a cruise ship as.
Yeah, it really is. Unfortunately,
I'll be doing one around Hawaii at the end of November. I can't wait to do that.
Okay. Well, that sounds exciting.
It's great. I'm looking
You guys,
forward to it.
you guys can be cruise buddies together.
Here we go. I'll do everything I can to protect myself. I did one at the beginning of the year and ended up with a little case of COVID, but got the treatments for it as soon as I got home. My infectious disease people set it up that they came to my house and gave me the treatments, and worked out very well for me. I did not get very sick. And got over it in a couple of days.
You got lucky, Harold. You got very lucky.
Well, the problem was with the flight issues that they had right before the holiday. We had to get on a train, go up to New York, stay in a hotel the night before we traveled on the boat. So we were like exposed all over the place, even though I had masks and everything you can do to protect yourself, hand sanitized every time I touched something. Somewhere along the way, we were exposed to something and got it. And I know it took us a couple of days to manifest itself. So we were on the way home and both my wife and I ended up with it. But on the boat itself, I had checked in when we first set that cruise up, and they had a mask mandate for everyone. And supposedly at the point that it was starting to wane away, and then they dropped the mask mandate, and I sent them a text message. I'm a transplant patient. I'm very perturbed that you guys are not updating keeping the mask mandate on. And they said, well, we're doing what we can do for the rest of the population. We're not so concerned about you.
Yeah.
That threw me a big kick in the butt, but I went on the trip anyway and truly enjoyed it. And I find it funny because my kids went on that trip with us, and they were out in the bars drinking till 2 o'clock every night, and they actually did not get sick. I think maybe I better start drinking. They were
Alcohol kills everything.
Exactly, and it's inside. So I was like, you guys got something going on there.
That's like you have to, when you have a dirty water dog in the city, you have to drink a beer with it because it kills all the germs that you just ate the dog with, so you're fine. That's what keeps you safe. That's the trick.
Yep.
That's the trick.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's be kind of Dr. Pereira's, or mindful of Dr. Pereira's time, and we'll let him go since he was nice enough to do this for us. And thank you so much again, Dr. Pereira. We owe you big time for this and all the knowledge that you gave us. So appreciative of it. We appreciate it always. And I'm sure we're going to beg for you to come back again to give us more knowledge come springtime, because something will have popped up again, I'm sure, to expose us and put us at risk.
Absolutely. Until next time.
I'll make sure I send pics from my trip, and she can send them to you.
Very good. Wonderful.
Good deal. Thanks. I will.
Jen, one quick question. Sorry, Dr. Pereira, I don't even know why I didn't think about this. Hey, how long does crypto take to go away from the water? Because it's all in the Baltimore water supply.
Oh, cryptosporidium. I think it actually takes a while, unfortunately. I think it's kind of hard to eradicate. So make sure you really filter or boil your water.
Okay.
That can be nasty, certainly in an immunocompromised patient. Yeah.
Oh, God. Oh.
For 4 years, I only drink bottled water.
And still.
And still
Well, you have
4.5
wells, so you
years.
have a
Yep.
well.
Because I have a well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or you have a really good filter for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well,
Was
we're,
like
we're trying to warn everybody from even like fountain sodas and all that stuff. I drink bottled water as it is, but that's why I was asking, because even beyond that, like, you know, like going out to restaurants, for example, and everything. So for me, from what I saw from the research, it takes like at least a month, if not
Yeah.
so, and they're not regularly testing it either. It's all over the Baltimore right now. So
Well, and the funny part of that is, like, I did a trip to Mexico many years ago, and you don't get it just from drinking the water. If they wash the fruit or veggies on your plate and they're not cooked, you can get it. So that's a big issue for a lot of people, because not everybody eats cooked veggies. They like the raw stuff, and that's a good way to catch those diseases.
Yeah, yeah. Or just regular.
Also, ice cubes in Mexico.
Yeah.
Just the water in an ice cube will do it.
Right, right.
Oh, God.
Well, maybe we can talk about that next time.
Great.
Well, have a great night. Thank you.
All right.
Good
Thanks,
night,
guys.
everyone.
Appreciate it. Take good care, everyone.
Everybody take care of yourselves. See you soon.
All right.
Good
Bye, guys.
night.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you all. Thank you, Doctor.
Take care.
Good night.
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 Let me stop sharing. Let's see.